Two friends, Alan Dale and Jerry Carew, who grew up just a few streets apart in St. John's East End, have been separated by Canada's geography for 3 decades. They came together virtually during the pandemic to chat about like-minded interests. Alan lives in PEI and Jerry in Newfoundland. Thriving in remoteness has been a common theme for both of them during the pandemic. Gale Force Wins, the podcast is the result.
And welcome to Gale Force Wins. I'm Alan Dale, and with me, as always, my good buddy from the East End of St. John's, Jerry Carew. How are you, Jerry?
Well, Alan, it's been an interesting time for me. As you know, this is the first recording. We record these episodes, first recording since my mom passed away. So it's been a tumultuous, couple of months. However, these episodes, she was a big supporter of these, and I'm really excited about our guest today. I'm on a committee with June, don't know her very well. I look forward to finding out a little bit more about June today.
Absolutely, Jerry. And it was a wonderful episode that we had with your mom on Gale Force Wins. Very special thing for sure. Fog is lifting now, as you say, and we're looking over the horizon with more exciting guests and can't wait to get to all of them. And Gale Force Wins is really about celebrating success. It's about all the good things that are happening all around us, and a lot of good things happen in Newfoundland and Labrador and Atlantic Canada. So without further ado, June, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Well, guys, it's really, it's just tremendous to be invited onto this platform today. I'm really excited to talk to you guys both. It's been a journey for me. So my name is June Tavenor. I'm a registered nurse, originally from Mount Pearl, Newfoundland. I'm located in Paradise primarily now. So townie through and through, that's for sure. I have been a registered nurse since 2005. Started that career actually at St. Michael's in downtown Toronto. So in terms of getting into the thick of it, I did that right off the hop, so they say. And it's been a passion ever since. And what's really been fun about my career and my personality going into it, obviously has been helpful in this, is that we get a bunch of comments, especially as nurses. It's very much that, well, this is the way it's always been done, and this is just the way that we do it. And we're not going to be able to do it that way because it's just too much work. And since the pandemic began in 2020, I've been able to predictably and consistently say, well, now we're going to have to, aren't we? So it's been great because everybody's been interested and everybody's been wanting to do that too, right? All the conversation now is around healthcare and how do we do it better. So it's been a great time, and that's sort of the very, very short version of who I am.
June, healthcare. When I think of healthcare in Canada, and I live in Prince Edward Island, so a pretty small operation here, but it moves like a super tanker. You've got to really slowly move it. So what you're talking about when you say that, it couldn't be done or it's always been done this way, that has to be a huge challenge. I can't wait to explore just that topic alone. Tell us how you made your way from Mount Pearl to downtown Toronto. What was that path?
Well, actually, during my university education, and once I got into the faculty of nursing, because I had a different path to begin with, but that we won't go there. So once I got in,
that's
there,
another podcast. We'll go into that later.
Another podcast for sure, yeah. But it was very much as much as I could get involved with groups or like the Students' Union out at the university, and then federally, I was part of the Canadian Nursing Students Association, and I have a lot of exposure to different methods of delivering healthcare and different employment even models across the country, and getting to learn as fast as I did in with the supportive system that they have at St. Michael's Hospital. It was just tremendous. And when I witnessed what the program was, I immediately applied so that I could do it during my 4th year in nursing school. And then it led into the new graduate program that they had there. And it's just been, it was that, oh, this is fantastic. I can't get my hands on enough of this action. And it was really neat, or I guess kind of cool to come back to St. John's and have a lot of the conditions not show up in the emergency department that you would normally see volume-wise at St. Michael's, for example. But it was the same patient. Like, it was all that same demographic. It's just on a different scale when you're talking about downtown Toronto versus St. John's. So it was cool to be able to have that experience and be able to do the training and experience en masse, if you will. and then be able to translate it to working at the health science emergency, which is what I did when I came home in 2010.
So you went right into emergency nursing, right out of school, right into Toronto?
Yeah, right into trauma and Toronto. Yes, that's exactly what I did. And it was 2005. I don't know if you guys remember this. They actually pegged that the year of the gun in Toronto because there was so much gang violence happening at the time, and drive-by shootings on Boxing Day. I don't know if you guys remember the case of Jane Kriba, a young teenager that was an innocent bystander. That was my first year working. That was my first exposure to that kind of stuff. Yeah, I started nursing that April, and that December of that year. So if I was going to crash and burn, it would have been that year. So happily I didn't. But having said that, I mean, the research does show that the life expectancy of an emergency nurse, not her career, but time spent in emergencies, about 10 years. And I got to about 13, I think it was.
Wow.
Oh, wow. So St. Michael's downtown Toronto, yeah?
Yes, it is. Yeah. And it's in this really interesting neighborhood, right? It absorbed the Wellesley Hospital, which was what is in the what's called the Gay Village in Toronto. And then we're right next to Bay Street. Right? Oh. And then on the other side is like the homeless, the penitentiaries, the things. It's just the most eclectic catchment area of any hospital I've ever seen. And even here in St. John's, you don't see that. Like the Health Science Center tends to be the trauma facility, whereas St. Clair's is the inner city, but you don't see a lot of mishmash, right? So that's their specialty, right. And the health science did trauma, so that kind of thing. Whereas at St. Mike's, it was just this melting pot of every patient population you could consider.
Wow.
Very cool.
And what would a shift look like at St. Michael's? Are they 8, 12 hours? Is it like, and what is the tempo when you're doing it?
When you turn the volume up all the way and it makes like that in the background, that's just what you felt like all the time for 12 hours at a time. So it definitely takes a different kind of person to be able to withstand that, maintain that over a career. So I tell you, those men and women that work in that facility, even to this day, folks that are still nurses and doctors there long since I've been gone. It's just been it's really cool to see that that's what they can do, right?
And you did that for 13 years.
Approximately, yeah.
Wow.
Thank goodness at the health science here in St. John's, it is dialed back a wee bit, but not much. And I mean, even just now, just chatting to some colleagues, one of my friends spent the night in the waiting room at the health science with what she described as cardiac symptoms. And now, God forgive me, I obviously don't know what's actually wrong with her, talking around the phone. But it's one of those things where she's my age. It's probably, a whole bunch of different things. But she was waiting for 8 hours and said, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. Like, I got stuff to do tomorrow. I got to work. I got to whatever. Do I need to see this doctor? And so that volume is still there. You know what I mean? And I know that they've really been having a hard time at the health science in particular these days, but that's not unusual. And, last week I heard somebody on open line talking about, well, we need to get Fury and Haggy to have a walk through this joint. And I'm like, yeah, Haggy, absolutely. Fury's seen it. He's been there. I've been there when he's been there. So I know that he knows what it's like. Now, what are we going to do about it? Right. So this is what's really cool, though, about the pandemic and having all these conversations now. The things this is the way it's always been done. In fact, our organization has been able to take a lot of patients out of hospital that would have had to go back and forth to an emergency over the weekend, or would have had to stay admitted to hospital at that cost over the weekend. But the numbers are such that either the patient had private insurance, or even, there's some patient programs that would qualify for this sort of thing. But it gets the folks out of the hospital, which is where they need to be.
So you're okay. So what was the motivator to leave this lifestyle and start? I mean, it's still within healthcare, and I want to get to exactly what the offering is. But what was the motivator to say, okay, I think I want to start my own thing? Because I would have to think that being a business person and being a healthcare provider are two different sides of the brain. I would have thought.
You would have thought, and that's sort of the ongoing theme of my organization and what I'm trying to do in the province and the country and beyond, because it's very much that thing where it's like, well, it's either politics or business, or it's money, or it's healthcare, excuse me. It's not, it can never be on the same plane. And I'm here to tell you that it absolutely can. Absolutely can. Let's get rid of that preconceived notion that if you care, that you can't be in business, because we're doing we've had quite the year, let me tell you. Global pandemic. to credit, but really it's been about the services that we offer and the higher demand for it. And now people are saying, well, okay, she's in business, don't support her. I even had a colleague nurse post about it, which was really disappointing, unfortunately, to say, well, if June really wanted to make a difference, why isn't she still working at the hospital, right? And I'm like, well, but yeah. I've actually been able to impact and help a lot more people this way than I was at the hospital. But you asked for that trigger moment, and it was working at the hospital, where cancer patients in particular and the hematology patients, and that's why I'm so passionate about the Leukemia Lymphoma Society, because that patient population in particular is just not treated the same as the rest of the cancer patients, which, it's got a whole bunch of different nuance and things, but we could, that's a whole other podcast again. But, so some of the things that they were saying, no, you've got to come to hospital for this. And these people are sick, they're scared, and some of them aren't that sick, but they certainly don't have great immune systems. And now we're asking them to come into an emergency department. And it just didn't make sense to me. So as I would have these conversations with the different physicians and management and things, and it all comes down to the budget. Sounds like a great idea, June, but who's going to pay for it? And so that was always sort of the rate limiting step from working within the system. And once I decided to sort of flirt with the idea of doing a few things on my own, I've always been really good at blood collection and IVs. Like I'm the guy you come get when nobody else can get the blood, right?
Yeah.
But so that's what I just started doing, doing a little bit of blood collection on the side, nothing exciting. But then I started percolating a few of these ideas and saying, like, hang on now, maybe if I was to start offering some of this stuff privately to, insurance providers or corporations, companies that would want to have that kind of on-call, on-demand style nursing. And then what else can we be doing? But again, it's sort of that patient population of cancer patients that really hits me, because as long as you've got somebody that can go that extra step to collaborate with that physician or with the most responsible nurse or whoever it is that's the case manager or whatever for that patient, if you can coordinate properly with that person and get the things in place and the checks and balances, and then you have somebody with the knowledge, skill, judgment, professional wise, to be able to implement the stuff at home and know what to do in contingency plans and things, there's been some just leaps and bounds of things that we've taken out of hospital.
I just want to zero in on something, and this is not health related, but it's something that Alan and I have talked a lot about. People who do something on the side. I'm of the belief that Newfoundland needs more of that. I mean, I've had a sideline for 30 years and it's done me very well. June, you've taken that sideline and now made it a career. If a lot more Newfoundlanders had the confidence to have a little sideline that eventually becomes something that employs people like you do, I think we'd be better off.
100%. Well, you look at the way that employment has evolved over the last 100 years. I mean, really, working for the government in whatever capacity has only been something since the Industrial Revolution, right? When factories and things needed people to work for them to make that kind of stuff happen. But before that, it was all private business people, entrepreneurs, farmers, seamstresses, all that stuff. So that, you see that shift of our reliance on the government or different establishments to provide employment. And that might be a little bit of why we're in the spot we're in right now. You know what I mean? In terms of the finances of the province and such. Too many people are reliant on a government paycheck and then a government pension, which I'm only going to get a wee bit of from my years of service. But you know what I mean? Like, still, it should not be the main goal of employment is this, when you go get a career, you got to go and follow the rules and learn your trade and things. But then if you've got an idea, go for it. There's a guy on the flight team, actually, and I'll give you his information after, because he's somebody that you'd be really interested to have a conversation with too. And he's a nurse, went into critical care, then went into the air ambulance sphere, and has now, over the pandemic, started, he bought himself a 3D printer just to start around with. Yeah. And now he's got 3D designs. Daryl Chaffee is his name. But now he's manufacturing these devices to work on air ambulance, to hold the syringes and things together on the very specialized pumps that you have to use at altitude. And he's selling like mass orders to the States and things, and his buddies that are on air ambulance are buying it off him. And I'm like, that's a great idea. It's perfect. You know exactly what the problem is and you can solve it. So what better person to ask? So
isn't that awesome,
get in
Alan?
there, get your feet wet, and then get out and start making it better on the other side too.
Yeah.
June, great example, and your conversation about you feel you broached the idea when you were in the hospital and they said, great idea, no money. Most people would stop right there. but you didn't. Just like the air ambulance guy, you didn't stop. You saw a problem and you said, I think we can do better, and I'm not going to stop. Well, what is it about your personality that makes you want to push through? And some people say, well, maybe this is not the best way to define it, but I'm not willing to take no for an answer. I'm going to keep going, right? So what is it about you that made you want to do that?
You know what? There is something about every experienced as senior nurse ever saying to every junior nurse, do what I say. This is just the way it's done. This because we've always done it this way and things like that. And I used to start every time someone said, well, because that's just the way we do it, I would start rolling my eyes and be visibly that pain. But in my head, I was making that mental note of like, that's not true. We can absolutely do it a different way. And so I've made a business and a career now out of identifying the things that politicians or leaders in different capacities, but delivering these social services, challenging those folks against, well, this is the way that they say it's always done, and nobody has any creativity or any kind of thought process on where this could go next. How can we improve on this thing? And if you don't give the people that work in the organization that latitude to be able to experiment with some of these ideas and trial a few things, then, you're not going to have that winning environment. But I will get, to Eastern Credit's Health. Ron Johnson is the VP of information or informatics, or I've got his title totally wrong there. But anyway, the technology stuff, Ron does that at Eastern Health.
Yeah.
And they're very keen with this whole living lab and things now on how do we engage the frontline practitioners to help us solve some of these problems. And with the living lab, they have this whole concept around, and this is kind of like the dream for me, to be able to develop something that is a product or a system or a way of delivering healthcare that we'll be able to market and sell to the rest of the country and into the States and beyond. And as part of the arrangement, when you set up with the living lab at Eastern Health, there's a portion of that then that gets kicked back to Eastern Health. And I'm like, oh my God, not only am I improving the way that we're delivering the service and saving money, but then also potentially becoming a revenue generator for this socialized medicine. I mean, that's the dream, right? I didn't get into nursing to get rich. I got into nursing because I want to help people and improve the system. So it's just been a really exciting year because more doors are opening and more conversations. People are more open to conversations about doing things different. The health accord with Pat Parfrey and Sister Davis, that's really getting some traction and things. And so it's exciting. And now with this impetus of the PERT report and cutting 25% per health authority, and then also merging the boards and things. And I'm like, oh guys, I have so many ideas. Poor Pat Parfrey is absolutely driven crazy by me. God bless him. He's doing great.
Does he have time to be a doctor? Probably not, hey?
Probably not anymore. Goodness, right? Yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. How do you come up with a plan and predict 10 years into the future what the population is going to look like and what they're going to need? And then where do you deliver it? Right.
June, in the brief time we've been talking, you certainly named your company right. Catalyst. You seem like quite the catalyst.
That's right. Yeah. That was not an accident. June, it was very much about being that. It was very much about being that thing that doesn't really change a whole bunch itself, but just causes great change throughout the system.
Love it.
You bring up a good point about things are a little bit chaotic at the moment, and you see the opportunity in there. You see the opportunity and what I found interesting is not to make money, it's to help more people. And the making money piece is just a byproduct of it all. That's not the why of what you're doing. And you're right. When you make the money and you create something and you build something in Newfoundland and export it globally, that benefits so many people along the way. I find that really fascinating. And that same theme I find peppered throughout our conversation with entrepreneurs in Newfoundland. They see the opportunities right now, especially in the technology sector. And we see that from industry players, from government people who want to spark it, and the academics want to be involved in it. It seems like it is the perfect storm brewing in Newfoundland. Would you agree?
I absolutely agree. And then we have such tangible and recent examples of tremendous success that didn't necessarily happen on the island, but was born on the island. So Verafin, they're doing all right, those guys.
Yeah.
Verifant Phone Med is another one. Charlene Brophy over at Phone Med, that organization was able, like myself, to identify where the holes were in the services that were being delivered. She's got a tremendous catchment throughout the States and into Central America and things, and across Canada. But be able to beef up their resources and deliver. The money was great, but man, it was just so good to be able to deliver on these services and be able to keep industry going, in a time when everything else is locked down. So the bits that we could help with. And then Charlene created a ton of jobs, and so did I. So like, it's great. But we had the idea here. We do tend to, she focuses on out of province, not a country, because it's harder. It is definitely harder to get the right conversations and the right agreements here with healthcare. It's free and it's a small population. So what do you do? But then when she's able to demonstrate the value add in other jurisdictions and then bring it back and be like, see what I'm saying? Then we're into a different conversation, right? And so the nurse practitioners coming on board on 811 was huge. That was a huge leap forward for the services of the province.
It's not just in Newfoundland that it's challenged. You always see businesses in Canada, they seem to have to prove themselves elsewhere to come back. It's like the Canadians are, somebody described it to me the other day, that Canadians are shoppers. Americans are buyers. You can bring your product to America, they'll buy it. Whereas Canada, we like shop around a little bit, right? Yeah.
We'll just kick the tires a whole bunch first, right?
Yeah. But you're right. We prove it somewhere else and then we bring it back. And what I find fascinating that, and I work with a lot of Canadian companies, and even though it's a tough slog to bring their product into Canada, they still have a genuine desire to do it. They want to bring it into Canada because they know that they can make a difference. It's easy, sell it everywhere else, but I want to make a difference back where I'm from, right? Do you have that same feeling?
Absolutely. And I mean, for me, it's not even necessarily out of province or out of country type stuff. It's really just outside the mold of who's paying for it. So, for example, the MCP program being the main source of how all of these services are reimbursed, physician and so on, registered nurses and nurse practitioners, even though we do the services, are not able to bill MCP for those. And only recently have nurse practitioners been able to practice independently. They needed physician oversight, which is a whole other conversation, but it was fixed. So let's not go there. But they still can't bill MCP. Like, we have a nurse practitioner working for us, and because our model is such that an employer generally, or an individual, tend to be who's paying for the services, that's how we get compensated and things. And a lot of times they do have private insurance that they're able to get reimbursed for, but that's not fair. What about everybody else that doesn't have those services? So in my mind, if somebody has private insurance, perfect. Here's your receipt. Bob's your uncle. You carry on. If somebody doesn't have private insurance, we should be able to bill MCP for that. Bottom line.
Right. Yeah. June, tell us, okay, so great lead up. We haven't even talked about Catalyst yet. Tell us about that. Tell us about Catalyst.
Oh, yeah, I've got a business too, right? So Catalyst Health Solutions is the name of the company that I started in 2016. And again, it was really just about going around and doing some blood work on the side. VON had shut down recently previous to that. And so there was a huge need for private nursing and foot care in particular, and some more of these advanced type services. So we decided that that's what was going to be our niche, is delivering nursing service, not necessarily home care. Like, we're not a home care agency. We're very much private nursing. So, and we'll refer on. Like, we've got a list of preferred partners that if somebody calls us and we're, if I'm like, yes, I'd love your business, but we're probably a lot more expensive than you actually require. Here's a couple of names that you should try next. So, outside of that, though, it's been very much around organizations and employers. And you talk about the tech sector in particular and the lack of talent around. So this being something that employers are able to offer to their people is why we do what we do, and who is funding it, essentially. So what happens is an employer pays for Catalyst, and then Catalyst is available at the beck and call of their employees. And so if somebody needs a blood collection, or they need a refill on medications, or if it's a minor ailment that we can take care of over the phone or a quick virtual chat, or if they have to come into the clinic and one of us have a look at them. But it's still that immediacy. It's that very much similar to what 811 would provide, but on a niche or more personalized scale. And so it's been this opportunity where the employer then looks like a rock star too, because this is something that they're being able to offer to their employees as like, you don't worry about taking a day off for your blood work, or, oh, flu shots are going to be here at the office in September, don't worry about it. And so it makes a big deal for productivity and employee engagement and satisfaction. And of course, obviously then the health outcomes of these folks. So
June,
it's been really fun.
Well, I picture you, collecting the blood in 2016, 17, but then you start getting busy with the business. How are you juggling doing the nursing things, but you're also doing the business development? How do you do that?
So that wasn't, I didn't, is the short answer. And so when things started getting quite chaotic in March of 2020, we were engaged by a large employer to make sure that a specific industry could stay functional, and that required COVID type services. Right. That was the inflection point where I sat down with my manager, and it was just me and her, you know what I mean? Because she was helping with the scheduling and things, because we did have a handful of nurses that were doing the services, but certainly not en masse that we needed all of a sudden when we had this client that needed this service delivery. And so that's when it was sort of like, okay, here are the systems and things you need to make that happen, and let's do the work right now. And honestly, I still really hadn't been doing a great job up until about a month ago. And now that things are starting to get a little bit quieter and we can kind of reflect and things, it's okay. But it was a matter of having to we need to hire the bodies, we need to get the resources. We engaged with a human resources consultant. We've got the accounting and everything is set up, because we weren't doing that kind of business. Yeah. So when it got to that scale, that's when it was very much about, okay, all the little things that I still like micromanage, that's got to go. And that was so hard for me, because I'm like, do this, but do it the way I would do it.
Yeah,
so right. Let go of that was our hardest thing.
Alan, it's interesting though, June, listening to you. Entrepreneurs often struggle with letting go because you've built a little baby here, right?
Exactly. And of course, a lot of Catalyst Health Solutions is also that Nurse June persona, which is myself, obviously.
Yeah.
But I did have can I tell a quick story? Because this is so funny.
Sure.
Can I?
We've got a couple hours. This is a podcast. We're not on a television schedule here.
Great.
We have all the internet, Jim. We have the whole internet.
we own internet. Alan and I own the internet. So you go. Run with it.
Everything all the time. So my parents are in their late 70s and spend most of their time actually in Hearts Content, which is where my father is originally from. And they had a friend of theirs say to them, I think I met your daughter the other day. And they were like, oh, well, what happened? Because they're always very like, make sure you're nice to people. And I'm nice to everybody. So anyway, this gentleman had come into the office to say, hi, can I get blood work and a urine test done here? And the nurse said, well, you're halfway there. Your zipper is open. So, and my parents were both like, yeah, that's our daughter. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, but you know what? It wasn't. It was one of my nurses. But that is 100% something I would have said. So it's really kind of like, okay, they are doing it the way that I would do it, right? Because we've created a bit of a culture now too. So that was a great story.
So,
I love that.
So June, how many people are on staff, and where do those people come from?
Well, most of them actually do also have a job at Eastern Health. So they work with us either casual or part-time. But there's the folks in the office there's myself, and then there's 3 other office support members. But then it's paramedics, registered nurses, licensed practical nurses, and obviously a new acquisition of a nurse practitioner. But yeah, it's just from all over. We've advertised, and of course we've gone now. We're not just in St. John's. We're right across the island. We're up into Labrador, in through Nova Scotia, PEI, even as far as Ontario. Actually, we were able to provide services this year. So wow. It's one of these. I do the way that we do our staffing model though is not I'll hire you and here's the hours you're going to get. It is you're an independent contractor in some capacity. So you tell us when you're available. We'll offer you a gig. If you want it, you take it. If you don't, you don't. And so it's really that retention piece though, where they get to pick and choose. And that's been a really important way of approaching this sort of a model to make sure that I've always got staff available, right?
Right. And that's back to Jerry's point. I mean, this is a perfect side hustle, really, isn't it, Jerry? This is the kind of thing that a lot that are already engaged in the providing this professional service now have an opportunity to do even more of it on the side, which is great.
Yes. And actually, in our policies and
100%.
procedurals manual, I made sure to emphasize that if anybody wanted a side hustle or has one, it's strongly encouraged. So go ahead and solicit, not patients, but like each other, colleagues and things, and tell me about it, because maybe it's something that we could roll into what we offer here. Or, you know what I'm saying? Like, I encourage it because I know what it's done for me and what it's done for a lot of other folks. Like the ladies from Granville Biomedical, same thing, right? Where they're trying to do good things on the side. And I'm like, gosh, you got great jobs too, eh?
Yeah.
But that's not the point, right? It's not the point.
Right.
It's interesting though, Alan, listening to June talk, we talk about this, the gig economy. I'm convinced it can bring and lift Newfoundland up. Alan and I have talked a lot about, how we're going to grow the podcast. We've got a bunch of business commitments around this now. And there's individuals, June, that we're trying to identify that are talented in the areas we need. And if we can have, many of them, 3, 4, 5 of them, we're not worried, because you can rely on picking when they're available, right?
Exactly. And so we've got a roster of about 20 nurses and, nurses / paramedics. I'll just call LPNs and nurse practitioners nurses. And every now and then I'll call one of my paramedics a nurse, and she's like, watch your mouth. And I'm like, there's nothing wrong with being a nurse. But anyway, it's one of those things, right? But anyway, that's that's another podcast, guys. But it's that we do have about 20 or 25 folks at any given time. And come flu shot season, all 20 are engaged in some capacity. Right now it's a bit of a lull with services, but as we roll out the blood collection and different things that we have been doing, just not promoting, then we'll start seeing a bigger demand for that. And it's the same thing though. You just tell us when you're available and we'll fill you up with work if you want it. And I wish there was something I could have done more with my the actual nursing, one-on-one nursing. If I could have been, because it was a full-time permanent job, but it was that traditional nursing schedule. Like, these are your shifts predictably forever, minus a drop day here or there, or minus your annual leave that you want to take or whatever. But it was, you knew exactly when you were working all the time. And even though that's a good thing for a lot of people, I thrive better on a bit of variability and flexibility more so. Yeah.
Yeah. So now you're working 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, right?
Now I'm never off. Yeah. I totally shagged that model, didn't I?
Yeah.
But it's different, when you're building your own thing. It doesn't seem like work.
It's not. And I got to tell you, even just in social settings, I'll just say social settings. People will be like, so what do you do? And I'm like, think of different ways to improve healthcare. What about you? Like, this is just who I am. It's what I do. It's not work. It is so fun, especially when I come up against somebody who's like, well, that'll never happen. And I'm like, is that right?
Well, and again, that what you just said, that'll never happen. That has to be a phrase that's repeated over and over and over again in healthcare circles. I deal with a lot of people, and in the healthcare, I find that's the response more often than not. That can't be done. My response is, I think it can be done. Just have to look at it a little bit differently. And I know that there's challenges within the healthcare system that may not exist in other places, but they're not insurmountable. It's about looking at the alternatives, the ways to do business. It's about seeing pathways. June, what I sense in you is that when you're faced with a challenge or somebody shows you an obstacle, you're immediately thinking, how do I work through that? Or what does that pathway look like? Would you agree with that?
Oh, for days. Absolutely, for days. And it's so interesting. Actually, my brother is here at my house right now. He's doing some work for me, but he works overseas. And I was going to be having an interaction with a high up in an oil company, and that's sort of his world. And I said, so if you were in my shoes, like, is there a thing that you would talk about, or is there a point of pain that I could maybe help them solve? And I said, what would you say if, and he was like, well, if I were you, I would keep my mouth shut. But I also know that that's not you. So they may even try to shush me, but I just don't get shushed very well.
Right. Yeah. It's the way you talk, and we've just met. So the way you talk much like a business person. You're very entrepreneurial. I would, if I had no idea of the background of the healthcare side, I would never have pegged you for a nurse. I would have said, okay, entrepreneur, tech company, which is basically you're both. You're a healthcare.
And that's so funny you say that. One of the girls in my office, who's actually a childhood best friend that I was able to hire because we needed the help, and she was with Dominion, and they were on strike, and she's a single mom, and it was the whole thing. We needed the help. The stars just aligned. But she looked at me, and she's known me, again, childhood best friend, since we were very small. And she looked at me the other day and said, you're not even a nurse anymore. I was like, how could you? She's like, no, you're a nurse, but like you're a business owner with a nursing background. That's what you are now. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I think I like that. I like the way that sounds.
It fascinates me because I think that you kind of hit the sweet spot in that you wanted to help a lot of people. You knew that you could do better, and now you're really impacting a lot of people. And what's happening is that, yes, I was able to demonstrate it. So, and now the more business we do and the better exposure we get, the more people we've been able to help. It's this snowball effect. And I think that there's a little bit of that, like, well, you don't want to look too successful because people are going to, you know what I mean? It's that concern of how that's going to be perceived. And really, in actual fact, the folks that are doing well are the folks that are able to do better and do more. So, the more you see somebody doing well, you want to encourage that, not discourage them, for sure. 100%. You want to keep the trajectory going because they're pulling everybody along with them, for sure. And now, June, you talked a little bit earlier about you do business with companies and they bring you in because they see the benefit to their employees, right? I mean, that's a huge, in my opinion, that's a huge recruiting retention tool. Some of the conversations you must get in with companies, they must be entrepreneurial in their thought process as well if they're buying into this model. So you must fuel off yourselves.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the people I'm having these conversations with are the ones that want to do better themselves as well. You know what I mean? Like, as employers and business owners, they also want to be doing better for people, especially the ones that are helping them be successful, which is, of course, their employees. And so what better way to do that than to say, listen, we got your healthcare needs taken care of as well. Here's the portal. Here's the conditions that you can engage the team for. There's always going to be presentations and different types of resources on this login thing. And then if you need to speak with a nurse practitioner for a medication refill, or you want to just get your blood pressure checked and someone explain it to you. That's one of the things that drives me absolutely crazy about healthcare. You'll go and get your blood work done. You'll sit down with your family doctor and they'll say, yeah, everything was normal. And you're like, okay, but what was normal and what wasn't, and what does it mean? And physicians don't have that kind of time. I mean, God love them. They're doing a tremendous job with what time they have, but really it's about being able to explain to people what some of these results mean. And so one of my superpowers and my favorite things to do is if somebody has a follow-up with a physician because they had some blood work or they had a diagnostic test or whatever, we're able to actually retrieve it through the Healthy NL network and the different tech platforms that we're using, and sit with that person and say, here's what's happening. Here's what you look like on paper. Does it match what you feel like? And if not, here are the questions you need to ask your physician or your nurse practitioner or the specialist that you're about to see. Because they ordered this because they were thinking this decision tree, but also it could be this. So make sure you ask about that. And so really arming people with the right questions and the right information before they engage with the professional, that's a big point too, right? And so we're able to really facilitate that conversation, because then the person walks in and says, well, doctor, this is what I understood. So you tell me what you think, right?
June, you know what? You just really piqued my interest. I mean, I've got an Apple Watch and everybody now is starting. The fact that I can actually track my heart rate at night while I was sleeping, I'm sleeping is fascinating. people are wanting to take better control of their health. And you're right. I mean, you get an audience with the doctor and you're not quite sure what the heck just happened. When you come out of it, you don't know. So
how many phone calls do I get from physician parking lots? I can't even tell you. That's really the main place. People will be like, so I just saw my doctor. I swear to God, like 80% of my phone calls from clients. That's what it starts with.
Yeah, but not only, I mean, what you just described there, June, it's not only are you doing the patient a very valuable service, you're helping them dissect, understand what just happened or arm themselves before going in, but you're also helping the physician because the patient is walking in a little bit more educated and able to together work with the physician to get to the bottom of this thing. And you're not just starting off on a blank canvas. Everybody's kind of contextualized going in. Would you agree?
Alan, that is absolutely hitting the nail on the head. And it is, I've often said, and some of my very best friends are physicians, obviously. This is the world that I've been in for the last 16 or so years. I believe so strongly in everybody working together, but also working to the most of your ability and your training. So whenever, and the NLMA will come on and start talking about a need for more family physicians. And I'm like, yeah, but can't we just talk about the fact that some of the shit that goes in there doesn't need to go in there? And I'm sorry, does that a reason though, right? Oh, good.
Yeah.
I wouldn't green light that right away because swearing is my favorite medicine, so don't do that. But like, if we could really reimagine how we're delivering it so that I could bill MCP for that. And then when they go see their family doctor, the visit only takes 10 minutes and not 45. So then the physician doesn't bill for that. You know what I'm saying? There's better ways to do with what we have. We need to be more creative and open to it, not just throw money at the problem.
100%, June. I find that if there's anything that we look at very binary in our society, very black, very white, it's healthcare. It's got to be this way or that way, when truly the answer is in the hybrid model somewhere. And we see slowly moving that way with nurse practitioners and, midwives and all of these things that we're entering into the healthcare system to supplement and to complement and to make it all richer and more diverse and better. It's slow, but it's so slow. For you, it must be so frustrating because you must see the path. You must see where we have to get to, but you've got to coax everybody along, right?
Well, and again, to Pat Parfrey's praise, he takes each email with, okay, thank you. If you could summarize that, that'd be great. Because it's like, blah, this is what we should do, Pat, right? So, it's the conversations are being had, but it's really about formulating a good, and this is sort of the thing that I say to even to my own staff, my own son, who's 12 years old, don't come at me with the problem. Come at me with a problem and then what you think we should do about it. Or what do you think the solution is? Because just complaining about it is getting none of us anywhere, right? As you can tell, as demonstrated by our current situation. But it doesn't mean that, and they talk about cuts and every time they say healthcare cuts, I'm like, can everybody just stop for a second and realize that cuts doesn't mean less service. Cuts means saving money. But what we should be focusing on is redistribution of the resources that we have, reallocation of that. The amount of money we spend on healthcare for the outcomes that we have is absolutely, it should be embarrassing as a province. So no, you don't need a cath lab on the West Coast. Let's talk about how we do that differently. You know what I'm saying? So it's, and you'll see me. It's frustrating, but again, that's why you'll see me on social media or different platforms as this saying these things, because we need to really rip the Band-Aid off and let's talk about how we put this thing back together again in a functioning, fiscally responsible, longevity way.
June, it's interesting, right? I mean, you're immersed in tech, you're immersed in healthcare. We are immersed in a pandemic. Newfoundland is on the cusp of a tech explosion, I would argue, and your political leaders are all healthcare people. To me, everything is lining up. You must be excited about this.
It's incredibly exciting. And in fact, a lot of the, I do say that the barriers are there, but a lot of the barriers that were there in 2019 were not there in 2020. So being able to coordinate with the Department of Health to provide flu shot clinics to employers that qualified for that subsidized program they had, that was just, that was so satisfying to be able to do that. Because, if we can do it for flu shots this year, maybe we can do it for flu shots every year. And then maybe we could do it for some of the like school age vaccinations, like kids who are anxious, can't get their vaccines in school. So their parents have to take a day off and take them out of school to bring them to a clinic. And wouldn't that be better if it was just a quick family home visit because it's on the roster of services that your employer is providing? Right.
Right. Yeah. June, an incredible journey. I mean, from Mount Pearl, St. Mike's, thrown into the trauma units, working as a nurse, you see challenges, you know that you can do better. You've been told no a few times. You said, that's not good enough. I can do better than that. You start your own company, starts off as a side hustle, I would argue. And now you've grown it into an entity, which is very, very impressive. That's an incredible journey, June.
Thank you. Thank you.
What piece of advice through all of that, all of those life lessons, what piece of advice would you give to somebody?
If you are told no, and I mean in any context, no, you can't play that sport. No, you can't take that course. No, you can't have that service provided at home or even just, no, you can't make that business work. Stop and think, is the answer actually no? And why is it no? Why is it no from that person? Because they come with their own set of preconceived notions or contextual information that would tell them that obviously what you're talking about is crazy. So even just as much as being able to say, well, I took out a business loan from BDC and quit my job to go at this full time. That was hard. And at first it scared the shit out of everybody that is involved in my life, right? Especially since I'm a single parent. I've got two parents. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's a lot riding there. And it got hairy. Let me tell you, there was a period of time when things were pretty scary looking. But I stuck to my guns. I knew what I was doing. I knew I was onto something. And at the end of the day, we were able to make it happen. And so, but I was told no so many times that this is not going to work, or what are you thinking? You've got a stable, predictable job with a pension, and but that's not what I was looking for.
Right.
So don't, anytime you're told no, think about who's saying no to you and why it's a no from them. And is it actually a no?
Right. I often say that I never take no from somebody who can't say yes. If you're not the person that can say yes to this or approve this, I'm not accepting no from you, right? So always, and people then refer to, I'll never take no for an answer. It's not so much that is, I want to show people that there is an alternative. There's another way to do it. June, that's an incredible piece of advice and an incredible journey, and you're making a difference. Jerry, what are your final thoughts here today?
Well, Alan, you and I have been doing Gale Force Winds since December 2020. I've met June on a couple of Zoom calls, and I knew, June, that you'd be an interesting person to have on. I am so overjoyed that you came on. I think we're just scratching the surface. I think there's an awful lot you have to offer our province. I think about a biography that I read about Elon Musk when he was talking about the rockets for NASA. I think he said he was going to build them 1/10 of the cost. And of course, all the brilliant people at NASA said, impossible, can't be done. Well, he's done it. Right. Now he's talking about doing launches for $2 million. It costs NASA $152 million. Think about that. Like, okay, you potentially could help this province wrestle the healthcare problem. Like it's a huge problem for us. So anyway, I just want to say thank you. I think we do have to revisit. Will you come back and have a chat with us in 6 months?
Oh, anytime at all. I'd love to. This was so much fun. And I cannot tell you how much I appreciate the words that you just said. That's very kind and humbling. Thank you very much for saying such.
Well, it's so true.
Well,
you're open and you're discussing this the way that Alan and I envisioned it. It's inspiring. And I hope there's not just young ladies out there that'll be inspired by you, but young men who are going to do something different.
Awesome. Let's do that.
Well, there's no doubt that was an inspirational episode of Gale Force Winds. Don't take no for an answer is what I heard right here today. And I got to tell you, to go from the challenging trauma centers in Toronto, leaving Mount Pearl, heading up to the big city, working in those type settings, seeing opportunities, seeing how things can be done better, and to be told in the bureaucratic process that exists within healthcare across our country, being told, no, it can't be done that way, or we've always done it this way, but not accepting that, knowing that there's a better way to do it, knowing that there's an alternative, knowing that you can help more people. And that's ultimately what June's all about, is helping people.
Yeah.
The byproduct of all of this may be growing the economy of Newfoundland, but the why of all of this, the why we're doing it is so that people can get the services that they need. And that is just fantastic. June, it was wonderful to have you on Gale Force Winds. And I always leave the audience with my own piece of advice. And that is, the world needs more June Tavenor. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to Gale Force Winds. That's Gale Force Winds, WINS.com.